Hello all, I am Edona Haklaj, a young European ambassador from Albania. So glad to be here in Coffee with YEA to show you a great conversation, I guess it's going to be like that, with Anna Shkreli, a friend of mine, but also a great activist, I would call it, from art and culture in Albania, and publisher, an activist, a person who always is trying to do some good things in our country. So Anna, first of all, thank you for being here, and I'm proud and I'm glad to be with you today.
Thank you, Edona, for all the amazing words that you just said. I'm not sure I deserve it all. However, I'm very glad to hear them. Thank you.
For sure, it's well deserved. You completed your master's in editing, if I'm right, so correct me in any time, at City University London, and holds a degree in literature and cultural heritage from the University of Bologna, Italy. An internship at PanMacmillan, London, gave you first knowledge of the book industry. After moving to Albania, you served as editor at Botimet Çabej, advisor to the Ministry of State for Entrepreneurship, and later as director of the literary museum Kadare in Tirana.
Yes.
Since July 2020, you are the head of the Berk Publishing and Culture Center, one of the projects that I really like, and we'll talk about it.
My favorite.
Yeah, your favorite. And also our favorite. I would like actually to start with your experience from studying abroad, how it is, so you can say us some little things about it.
Yeah, sure. So I moved when I was 18 years old. I moved to Bologna to study my bachelor degree, which is, as you mentioned, literature and cultural heritage, which it was amazing. And I think it gave me all the really academic depth that I needed to pursue further on a career in publishing and literature industries, let's say. I remember that my biggest burden was actually studying Latin, which sometimes, I still dream about not actually getting that exam, but I managed to pass it. And this is the most amazing thing that I have done in my life is study Latin. I managed to do that. So after completing my bachelor at the Bologna University in Italy, I came back to Albania for almost a year. I worked in TV, knowing that was not the right career for me. I didn't enjoy that actually.
Why you thought about it?
Well, first of all, I'm not a journalist, so it's not an internal drive. And I was working more on the entertainment side, which I found it to be a bit of a brainwash industry. So I didn't really enjoy it. The entertainment. I'm not talking about newsrooms or anything. I never worked in the sector. I'm sure that there are amazing people working in entertainment and doing quality things, but I think it was just not for me. That was not my career path. So
not your world.
No, it was definitely not my world. Then I left for London in 2014. I left for London, where I studied editorial at City London University. And I got a degree in international publishing, which is very similar to editorial. We just have some we study a bit more on copyright law. So this is the only difference between the two degrees. One is a bit more specialized in copyright international laws. That's why it's called international publishing and not just editorial and publishing. So I should say that London is my favorite place in the whole world. Probably I would have kept on living there if Brexit didn't happen, but it actually did. And it was such a huge surprise for us all, because we fell asleep deeply believing that England was gonna vote Remain, and then the result, it's history, we all know it. So there were 2 amazing years. I had some great experience at PanMacmillan, the international publishing house. Yes, I was actually part of the 5th centenary of William Shakespeare, which was a huge program led by Macmillan at the time, which involved several events and activities, cooperating, of course, led by the Globe Theatre, which is also the most renowned one, let's say, propagated and on the William Shakespeare's works. And it was huge. My most valuable memories, I think, and experiences.
With all your experience, and maybe even with your experience in Albania, what does it mean to be on this side of the story, in the side of a woman in art and culture, protecting art and culture, being in the side of the story? So what does it mean to you?
Well, I mean, working, for me at least, working in art and culture, it's kind of a vocation. It's like choosing to become a priest or clergy. I mean, it's an inner thing. And sorry, I have an issue with my laptop, so I'm on my phone. So it's really a vocation, and I think that I've had this conversation with my parents as well, because they actually wanted for me to choose another career path, saying that in Albania, there's not much retribution financially. I mean, for people that work in the sector.
They were to be a doctor or a teacher.
Probably an architect.
Yeah.
Probably an architect. Yeah, for me, yeah. Probably an architect. But at the same time, this profession, I think it's more of a lifestyle, at least from also all my colleagues and my collaborators, which I appreciate very much. I can actually see that working in the sector is a lifestyle. So it's a way of living. It's very intricate with your political beliefs, with your activist work, with the way you live your life, and like where you put the main gravities. So that's what I'm saying, that to me, compared to other professions, there's not like a clear drawn line between what's like social life and professional life, and what's like personal life and professional life. I feel like those two are very blended on your personal identity. So there wasn't much I could do about it. That's why I think I ended up here.
Yeah, you choose it. That's why you choose it, at least.
Yes.
In your career and your experience, I mean, as a publisher, as an activist, what do you think about people and their interest in art and culture? Is there a real interest, a real attention, or the interest has fallen?
You mean
in Albania?
Are you in Albania? So you're referring to Albania? Yeah. I think that there's a lower interest. Of course, there's still a large and important share of population that it's interested in art and culture. However, I think we have a decline. I think the decline is global, actually, but in Albania, it's even more, let's say, implicit and heavy, because of like we are a very small population at the end.
Yeah.
So it's very hard. Like if we are a population of 2 million and something, it's very hard to keep a cultural industry going if we are referring to independent actors, because we are an independent center. So we are not supported by statewal donations
public,
we do not support the public funds. I mean, we are completely independent of that, which I think for Albania is very important to have independent cultural institutions, because I feel that it's the only way to maintain this, let's say, islands of freedom of mind and of freedom of discourse. Yeah. Therefore, I've always believed that it's better to actually be independent and produce maybe a bit less than to be implicated in public funds and then, like, have a lower degree of freedom, because this is eventually what happens not only in Albania, but I think like from all the conversations which I had with my other colleagues, like working in Macedonia and in Belgrade, Serbia, and in other places. I mean, this problem of treating public funds and statewide donations as means of control, it's a bit shared all over the Balkans. I think it's not only our problems, but I think it's quite relevant here as well. So going back to the discourse, it's difficult. It's difficult, and I've always thought that maybe what would eventually help us is for like trying to create this culture of consciousness, in the sense that readers and consumers, so the audience, once they are conscious where they're spending their money, and I'm not talking only about Berk, I'm talking all the amazing independent centers that exist in Albania, because there are several. So they should be conscious that this money are going to support this kind of independent and freedom institution. And once we manage to create this kind of like public consciousness, then I believe that we can keep on surviving and operating even with small numbers of readers, because, like, I mean, this is reality, you know well. Prior to the 90s, all the book print runs were of at least 10,000 copies, whereas now we have ended up in an industry that, like, the normal standard print run of a new book, let's say, is generally of 500, which is actually ridiculous, you know. But I mean, I'm not seeing it all dark and gloomy. I think this is a period, and I think that eventually, with a little bit more cooperation, for example, with Kosovo, I think that we can actually manage to survive. But we're still talking about survival mode, nothing more than survival.
You mentioned your contacts, your friends from Macedonia, and I'd like to know about, from your experience, how is the situation in Albania compared to the Western Balkans or to Europe? How do you think, are we going to move as them, or we are in the same situation? So maybe to explain a little bit.
So you mean culturally
Western
or
Balkans,
politically?
yeah, in art and culture. So I mean, in the interest from people, or even in the investment made by the state or not.
You know, I mean, there's a quote that says the grass is always greener on the other side. And like, not knowing maybe the internal dynamics of a country, it's very difficult to actually try and foresee or give like a realistic tableau of it. However, in my personal experience as a friend
from your
and
talks
a tourist,
with your friends, maybe.
I feel like there are some places, for example, Belgrade or even Skopje, which have a larger and more dynamic independent culture and underground sector. This is what I felt. Like, socially and culturally, I feel that they're a bit more engaged. And in the case of Belgrade, for example, I think that they have larger structures, independent structures, that are more connected to European cultural programs and different types of interregional projects. In Albania, I actually see this less and less. And I generally, in those few cases where I see like independent organisms cooperating with European projects, they are usually in some weird way under the umbrella of some form of government, like maybe a larger one or a local government. But this is what I have actually perceived. This is completely personal. I mean, these are my personal observations.
Yes, for sure. But we have some organizations, for example, European organization as Europa Nostra, for working on protecting the art and the culture, the cultural heritage. And we have even in Albania some awards, we know, from them, Eurocastra Foundation. There are some organizations, but how do you think in Albania has this?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'm not trying to downgrade the work of anyone. I said it from the start that there are amazing independent realities here, that they are doing an amazing job. Absolutely.
For sure, but maybe they haven't reached in all the area of Albanian people.
But you know, I mean, I'm always talking on the perspective of literature and like literary arts and publishing, because this is what I know best. I mean, I can sure give an opinion about, for example, I don't know, there are organizations like Cultural Heritage Without Borders, but they are mainly operating in the section of like physical culture. So the preservation of dwellings and churches and mosques and monuments. So they are not working on intangible. So basically, I was referring to my field of work.
Yes, but I would like to go to your project, your Berk. I know this is the one that you love most, and for sure is an interesting, great project. I have been there, and for sure we had
Yeah.
some interviews on that area. But how did the idea come? How did the idea come to you? And it was difficult from in your from the skins, or maybe from the idea in your mind to have it physically now, not only a publishing house, but you have called it a philosophy.
Yeah, it is a philosophy in some way. It really is a philosophy in some way, because we started working on that project, or at least I don't want to use the pluralis majestatis anymore. So I'm sorry, I'm not using we. Uh,
No
this was a
problem.
joke. I'm like, I started working on the project when, so my grandmother
Yeah, it was
died.
your grandmother's
She
house,
passed
right?
away. Yeah, yeah. And like, I saw this place of love for me, because that was a place where I used to spend a lot of time in my childhood. And it was actually the first entry gate in which I created a contact with the city of Tirana. I saw like this place of love and care being degraded every day because of abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see this kind of abandonment. I could see it like all over the city, because we have all these cultural, like, heritage monuments, like the villas of Tirana,
Yeah,
which are being left in a deplorable state. And for many reasons, some because their owners want to ruin them in order to build like higher buildings and skyscrapers, some because like they just don't have the right amount of funds to renew them, because I mean, they need a lot of investment, like financial
for
investment.
sure.
This is true.
Yeah.
This is true. And like, most of them have, others have like real problems with the many owners of these houses,
A
because
real problem here in
yeah,
Albania. Yeah, a big problem
we know
actually.
that, like, yeah, we know that,
Mm-hmm.
like, on the property issue there, here has been like a real cacophony, let's say. So there are many of these houses with at least 15 or 20 owners that
Mm-hmm.
none of them decides what do they want to do with the house. So at the end, we have these islands of abandonment in the middle of the city, which also they bear a lot of their like initial charm, because they are beautiful buildings, and then they
Yeah.
are representatives of their time here, which is part of the history of Tirana that I think it's being erased very fast, of this new urban development,
Yeah.
that they tend to bear the name of progress. But then we should really stop 1 second and discuss what's actually progress, because we
What
are
is
not
happening?
talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we are not talking about, of course, preserving everything, but maybe we should talk about the degree of preservation and who decides it, and how much representation of public will and popular will it's behind these urban strategies. If we are always talking about like a liberal democracy, so this is the whole discourse that was going on in my head at the time that the house of Berk was actually waiting abandoned there for me. So I decided to try and do like this experiment, which I never knew how it was going to turn out. And I actually still don't know how it's going to turn out, because we are not yet 2 years old. I mean,
Yeah.
in August we will turn 2. So
A little boy or a little girl, let's call it.
definitely a girl, definitely.
Great.
Yeah. So so I decided to restore the villa, preserving its original structure.
Mm-hmm.
It follows like a morphological shape of an L, which is typical of Ottoman buildings and dwellings of the Tirana of the period. And I preserved it as it was, because I wanted exactly to bear this philosophy and to try and show how we can refunctionalize these spaces. So how can we reuse these spaces without changing them or demolishing them? Because these houses and these spaces can have other lives beside their first one.
Yeah. Was it a hard process?
It actually was hard. You know why it was hard? Because
why?
when I was working with the construction team, sometimes it was harder to preserve and restore than to throw away and rebuild. And they would never understand what was the actual value of chair pitch, which is in English, it would be adobe. You know, it's adobe. It's this traditional way of building with clay and cluster and other materials. And this is the thing, that there's this huge prejudice that vernacular architecture, it's not important. It's useless. Because when we are referring to the value of traditional heritage and the value of villas, we are always referring to the villas of the 20s and of the 30s, the time of the King Zog administration, that they built these villas as a reflection of what was going on in the West, mainly in Italy and in Austria.
Yeah, from Italy, most of them.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have learned to value that architectural historical period of Tirana, but we never actually learned to value what was prior to that. That were these villas of adobe, made of adobe, with the white walls and the internal little gardens, and hidden from the street, that everything was going on inside, with the 3 different spaces, the chardak and the inside garden, and then the inside area with the wooden ceilings. So I read this book, which I love, and I would like very much recommend to everyone, that it's titled Voyage d'Orient. It's from Le Corbusier. That is a very important... I love that. It's a very important modernist architect, and Generet, it's its real name. And so when he arrives to Istanbul, searching for Constantinople, he actually falls in love with the vernacular architecture of the city, which is very much alike with Berk and like the traditional dwellings of Tirana. So he falls in love with that kind of architecture, and he writes this amazing essay on how this architecture is an architecture without vanity. It's an architecture that comes from within, from the ground, using like ecological materials. And it's an architecture that doesn't want to shout superiority of the name of the one who constructed it. It's an architecture built like from the people, just to fulfill the needs and functions. It's not an architecture that wants to shout like richness or superiority or imposure or anything of that. So he falls in love with this architecture, and this is what I got from the book. So I as well fell in love. I was initially in love because of like my grandmother's house, but then I actually understood even like the aesthetical and functional value of this kind of architecture, inserting it this way into a spectrum and like into some sort of style.
Oh yeah.
So this is the beginning of it, and I very much started to advocate for these places to be like preserved and transformed into other entities, such as like a co-working space, a publishing house, a cultural center, anything really, you know, because like our perception of beauty is very much modeled on what we are offered. Like if a child is going to be raised with the idea that beauty is a skyscraper, he's going to think that these realities, like urban realities, are worthless.
Yeah.
But if a child is taken into spaces like this and he actually enjoys and creates memories and like becomes fond of it, then he's going to start and value what it's how it can be another way of living and perceiving the city. And of course, I'm not saying that this should be the only one, but I think that a city with mixed realities and with such a like historical diversity is always better than something
they may
built from
coexist
scratch.
together. Yeah, they may coexist together. Traditional, the modern, and all of them.
Absolutely, yes, it can.
So how are the works going on the Berk? Is it the way you expect for it, or it's way better?
You're very kind. So now it has taken its own life. I mean, for me, I've always thought that the moment that Berk it was going to be like secure, in the sense that it would be strong and independent from me, it would be the moment where it would stop being associated only with me. And I've always hoped for that moment to come soon. I never wanted for Berk to be associated only with me. Otherwise, that would be a failure. I wanted Berk to be associated with different people that work in culture. And now I'm happy that in this second year, Berk is associated with its authors, like it's associated with Arba Bajaku, which is a very talented author writing on architecture. It's associated with Sokol Chunga, which is an amazing translator. It's associated with Ardi Andreța, which is one of like directors of an editorial imprint of Berk, which is Rado Întășența, that publishes mainly gag authors from the 30s. So these authors that were very much like buried and left behind by the communist regime because of like political ideology. So Berk is becoming an entity that is being associated with various and different people beside from me. And I think this is the moment where I can see it started walking by itself. And this is what makes me hope that it's going to grow in the future, and it's not going to succumb to market issues. So I think that it's going to be around for a long time. At least this is what I hope. But it's a challenge. Every day it's a challenge.
What about people? Are they having interest on this kind of these areas, kind of these spaces that we actually miss in Tirana? We miss in our city because you said before what is happening with independent structure here, and maybe some private, maybe some people that are trying to work and do something, but you see if people are having great interest or big interest or smaller interest in these areas.
I think, it was something like Berk was very lucky because the year that Berk opened its door was the year in which the National Theatre of Tirana was destroyed. And that was a local event that shocked a lot of people. So it's from there started a whole discussion on preservation and participation into urban public decisions of this scale, and into public representation and what we're losing and what we're gaining and everything going on from that. So Berk was born in this year. And for this reason, because of like the public debate was very much was very rich of this topic, like it was kind of like proliferating everywhere. Was talking about this
business.
It had a lot of attention on it as like a new private initiative to try and propose a different model of handling this kind of like cultural and traditional realities. So it was lucky in this sense, and we had a lot of attention upon us, even by the media, which I would very much like to thank for that. They have always been very present. You too have always been very present.
Because we love art and culture, and if every one of us
a lot.
Could do their contribute to speak and to be there just to promote it, it would be great.
Yeah, it's very nice. So I actually felt very much supported with the Berk project by everyone, and I can see that like even in the book fair, in the Tirana book fair, it's usually November, and it's like the main book event of the year. There are a lot of people that actually come to buy books because they want to support the
how was this experience?
Idea.
How was this experience this year? So Berk is already too. So was there interest on the books, on maybe the authors, the people?
I mean, it was a little bit more vague than the other year. If you talk to any of the publisher, they will tell you that sales were lower. But at the same time, for us, we have a very particular kind of editorial policy. We are very much focused. We are not publishing mass markets book. We are not publishing novels or like what sells the most. No, we are not doing that. Not because I don't value that. Of course, I value that. I think that everything should be out there for readers. I mean, I think no one should be judged on what they read. I don't believe this. I mean, if I need to read something and it actually helps me heal inside, no one can tell me that this is good literature and this is junk. I mean, this is not right. But we are not publishing that because like the market is oversaturated with novels and bestseller titles. So I think that for us, it's better to actually create a niche sector where we can be good at and work on that, as are, like, for example, linguistic studies, architecture, and historical books. So we are kind of like specializing our structure into this kind of niche market. For this reason, I mean, anyway, our reader is a very specific one, so I cannot really compare.
You have a specific public, so your audience is...
It's our audience is doomed to be low. I mean, we're doomed to sell.
But it's better like that, so...
I don't know if it's better, but it's us, you know, it's like, it's what I was telling you at the beginning, like, this is our vocation. I think we cannot really change that, so.
In fact, there are more than 30 minutes talking together. Maybe I didn't know that we'll go so fast, but I'd like to know from you if you have a message or thing that you'd say for protecting the art and culture, for promoting the literature, for promoting, I don't know, everything that you are on this side and you are working on it and you are protecting it as Anna Shkreli, but not even just in Albania, maybe the European context. What can we do to promote, to save, and to work for our art and culture things?
I think that the most important thing is trying to support independent centers, whether it be Berk or not. I'm not only talking about Berk. I said that in the beginning. There are a lot of other centers. Independent centers are very important for internal democracy. And I think that art and cultures play like a very important role in promoting internal democracy. So what I'm hoping for in the future is maybe a cooperation project for capacity buildings in the sector, in order for all these independent centers to be able to raise funds by themselves, and therefore promote liberty and freedom of mind.
Could the art and culture be okay for EU integration, maybe?
I think yes. I think yes, because I think that, like, the most. So I mean, I'm definitely not an expert on politics.
Our own personal.
But I mean, the main goal to running toward the EU is strengthening internal democracy and democracy control mechanisms, and then from that derives everything, like anti-corruption and all, like, other major issues that we have in Albania. But I think that through promoting art and culture and actually increasing educational levels through this mechanisms, I think that we can strengthen democratic mechanism inside the country, and maybe reach that goal faster. I think it's easier to reach that goal by being more educated than by being less educated. So
yeah, and that's a great message and a great way to go on it. I want to thank you for your time, for your conversation. I really enjoyed a lot, as always. Not
Edona,
our first time, but it was a little bit different.
Thank you very much for the conversation. I loved it.
A lot of success in your way and in everything you do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I wish that to you too.
Thank you.